The production of this show is made possible by the support of viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and become a subscriber. Welcome to Conversations That Matter. Each week we address an issue that is shaping the future of British Columbia. Today, our second in a series on democracy. Mike, who's our guest today?
Colleen Hardwick. She's founded this new online platform called PlaySpeak. It's really responsive to that adage you hear that in a democracy, decisions are made by the people who show up. This can be in the voting booth, or it could be coming to a town hall, a city council meeting. Colleen Hardwick's new PlaySpeak is trying to make sure that people who are feeling alienated or out of the public engagement process, or maybe who have never participated, can find a way to easily and efficiently access this form of democracy, this concept of public consultation that we know is so critical and so important in terms of everyday decision making that governments go through.
Now, she says that this isn't just ideologically driven, it's that she had reached that point where she was fed up and she wasn't going to take it any longer, and she was trying to find a mechanism to make sure that she and others were heard.
Yeah, that's right. This came from a personal space for her. She saw a potential plan that was being built by her city in her neighborhood, and she looked around and didn't see anybody participating but herself. And so decided to come up with an innovative platform, building on her own background in urban geography and a very interesting background in the film world, come up with an innovative platform to help people get more connected. What's nice about this for governments is it actually helps pinpoint the people that need to be engaged. So it's place-based, PlaySpeak, in that if you're saying that you live in a neighborhood where there's a proposed development, well, the platform actually allows that to be verified so that governments know that they're actually hearing from the people who really are going to be impacted by a decision.
So hopefully through this introduction of a technological platform that can be trusted, maybe we can see greater engagement.
Well, one would hope. You know, we look at voter turnout as one major important metric of thriving democracy. We have barely just over half of our citizens, 54%, who voted in the last federal election. But when you ask the people who didn't turn out, well over half of them said, I would have voted if I could have done it online. So you extend that out to the period between elections when the heart and soul of a government and a democracy is thriving, and say, look, what if you could engage in the decision about a future playground or a neighborhood planning process or bike lanes or whatever it might be that a government wants to know about. If you could do that online, well, maybe we could get better participation, and then that might also extend down the road to voter turnout as well.
Doing it online, it turns out, based on my conversation with Colleen, is a little easier said than done, but she seems to be making great strides in getting there. We'll go to that conversation that we had with her on August the 25th after these messages. Thank you for watching Conversations That Matter. It is thanks to the support of viewers like you through subscriptions at conversationsthatmatter.tv that this program is made possible. Well, welcome. So when it comes to civic engagement, you had reached a point where you started to say too many people are disconnecting. What was it that sort of set off alarm bells for you?
Well, initially I was looking at a specific problem, and that was the Arbutus corridor on the west side of Vancouver. And I'd been talking to the CPR and I'd been talking to the city, and this is going back 4 years ago, and on the heels of a visioning process which had been conducted in 2006, where we'd gone neighborhood by neighborhood, walked the tracks, whiteboarded all of the ideas about the opportunities that were there. But we were stuck in a logjam, and nothing would move. When I talked to the CPR and the City of Vancouver, they both came back and said, logjam around public consultation, remember the RAV line, remember the creme de la creme. So nothing happened. They did come back and say, well, where's your evidence of public support, Colleen? And that's really what got me thinking about public consultation and providing evidence as part of our regulatory framework.
Now, by they, you're talking about CP was asking for that, or the city was?
Well, on both sides. They were both mindful of the fact that they had a potential public relations nightmare on their hands, which has been playing itself out ironically
which they do right now. Yeah.
Now, but this was a number of years ago, and again, the Arbutus corridor has been sitting fallow for years. But it was that specific example that got me thinking about the problem, because we do public consultation because it's supposed to provide us with evidence to inform our deliberation and ultimately influence the outcomes, whether those are decisions or policies. But the problem is that it doesn't work that way in reality. The decisions are foregone conclusions, and the public know that. And as a result, they don't care to be part of a consultative or civic engagement process.
Why have we gotten to that point where the public goes, you're not listening to me, and the city basically even gives a tip of the hat to that very concept of, yeah, you can go ahead and say all these things, but so what?
Well, I find it very ironic because in this city, and this is a broad pathology that we're seeing across the board, we've got all of these great social media technologies, and we've got internet technology and communications technology that allow us to be genuinely communicating with people, but we only use it in a very superficial way. So you hear all sorts of lip service to public engagement or civic engagement, but it doesn't play itself out in reality because it's not open and transparent. It tends to go through the black box of an online survey or market research panels or things of that nature. So the public can't actually see what's going on.
How did we get to this point? Because isn't civic engagement one of the foundations or building blocks of a democratic society, that we're supposed to be engaged to build a better environment that we all live in?
Well, precisely. Democracy in the first place, going back to Aristotle, is about the persuasion of peers. It's about being able to persuade citizens that you're doing the right thing and engage them in the process. But unfortunately, we're not doing that, and people smell a rat, quite frankly. And this isn't the first time. And it's not just civic engagement, it's voting generally. We're going into a municipal election cycle in November, as you know. We'll be lucky to see 30% of eligible voters show up at the polls, which means that 70% of eligible voters, not the total population, people that are eligible to vote, are not voting.
It's an extraordinary number, 70%. Those people are basically allowing a very small group of people to decide how their community is going to be run.
Again, precisely. But that's because they don't believe that they can have an impact. And there's plenty of good reasons for them believing that. It's borne out over and over again, as we've seen abundantly in this city in recent years.
You've been politically active throughout your life. You were born into a political family, so you saw what engagement does. But have you seen firsthand the deterioration of citizen involvement, and what do you think has happened?
Well, I have seen it personally, and you're right, I was 10 years old when my dad was first elected to city council, so I'm one of those kids that grew up putting up lawn signs and working phone banks. So when I was growing up, and again coming out of the 60s, there was a huge movement towards power to the people. And over the years, that has really devolved, and we've become, again, much more cynical about our political process. I think part of it is education. People don't know. Unfortunately, we do have civics as part of our high school curriculum in this province, but nobody teaches it. And as a result, when you talk to kids, they don't know one level of government from the other. They don't know what they're responsible for, how taxation works, how supply of services works. All those things are alien to them unless they're in that 30% at one end of the spectrum that are going to be interested. But most of them just don't think that they can have an effect. So why even bother? Don't waste my time.
We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for watching Conversations That Matter. It is thanks to the support of viewers like you through subscriptions at conversationsthatmatter.tv that this program is made possible. You know, you talked about the 1960s. If we take a look at some of the enormous demonstrations that went on in the 1960s about very real social issues, we saw that a lot of people felt that they could make a difference. But what seems to have happened as we fast forward here now 50 years, we've got the rent-a-crowd that goes out to do the protest, and it's as though even they know nobody's listening. They're just there to protest anything. So how do we then engage the average person now to say, okay, I got to get back involved, because if I don't, it's going to be done to me rather than with my participation.
Well, let's talk about the evidence part of the equation. Again, consultation leads to evidence to inform deliberation and ultimately influence outcomes. Public meetings, however, if that's our evidence, I mean, public meetings are gong shows. They attract the usual suspects, NIMBYs, you know, the crazies a lot of the time, or the rent-a-crowds.
Or the microphone hogs.
Who, you know, the 15 minutes of ramble.
Yeah, is there a question disguised in your rant?
So again, all that is going to show us is that we have evidence of the extreme. If we're dealing with things within specific geographical areas, cities have boundaries, neighborhoods have boundaries, we can try and go and knock on people's doors and ask them. But people won't open their doors anymore. They think it's a home invasion, or they live in condos and you can't get past the lobby.
So the alternative then is to poll them.
Well, we can't poll them using landline telephones. Again, we used to have these things called phone books, remember that? And we had telephone landlines, but fewer and fewer people have them. The ones that have them won't answer them. So you'll get a very skewed sample of stay-at-home, you know, lonely seniors or whatever. So what we have needed to be able to do is to bring that process online, because the vast majority of people are online, and the whole argument about the digital divide, the haves and have-nots, has become less and less relevant as it has become so ubiquitous. So we know that we need to be able to reach people online, but that hasn't been an authentic process either.
Right, because so many people have pseudonyms or false identities.
Well, looking at social media as an example, Facebook in its last quarterly said that I think 11.2% of all accounts are bogus.
11.2.
And Twitter, forget about it. I mean, Twitter is just there for people to be blowing their own horns. So going back to evidence, if we're using social media as an indicator, if we're doing sentiment analysis based on that data, it's garbage in, garbage out. So it's interesting and it can be informative, but it's not going to give us the hard evidence that we need. Similarly, any kind of, you look at any political blog or online newspapers, anything that comes out that's remotely controversial, it's overrun with trolls. And what we see now are trolls. You have to have encountered the trolls.
What are the trolls?
The rise of the trolls. Trolls are people, paid or unpaid, there are both kinds, that will try and disrupt, discredit, and engage. And that's their playbook. Their whole raison d'etre for being online is to skew a result. So you'll see it again, people being extremely rude and disruptive, dismissive of other people's opinions, and basically there to get them riled up and angry so that they'll respond and, you know, hopefully put their foot in their mouth so they can be discredited. So trolls are a real problem online, and again, they can only flourish in a climate of anonymity.
Well, can they not also exist in a mob mentality where they quite literally start bullying people?
Oh yeah.
And so in real life, you can go into a public forum and still have somebody who is going to try and outshout or discredit somebody in person.
Exactly.
And so it exists in the online world, but in the very real physical world as well.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because a lot of people don't want to go to a public meeting because they don't, you know, they're afraid to stand up in public and take the kind of shots or body blows that the bullies will put out there. And then now we're seeing the same practice playing itself out online.
We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for watching Conversations That Matter. It is thanks to the support of viewers like you through subscriptions at conversationsthatmatter.tv that this program is made possible. So if we go back to 4 years ago, you had reached a point where you said, I'm fed up and I can't take it anymore. What'd you go and do about it?
Well, the specific problem that I was looking at again was how do I get evidence of public support within the Arbutus corridor, one way or the other. And I looked at public meetings, and looked at door knocking, and looked at social media. Again, love it for getting the word out, but not in terms of obtaining verifiable evidence. And one day I was literally staring at Google Maps. We had created 9 individual neighborhood segments, and this was part of the 2006 visioning process. So there were 9 neighborhoods from Kitsilano to Marpole, and I was thinking, how am I going to reach them? And I started to see green dots popping up on the map in my mind's eye, and that's when it hit me, boom. What if we could connect people's digital identity to place and prove it? Then if we poll them or try and obtain feedback from them, we're going to know that we're reaching people in the affected area and have verifiable evidence to inform the process. So that's what got the whole thing started. And then the question was, well, how do we connect with people online within geographical areas?
So you get the idea that you see all these green dots on a Google map in your mind and think, how do I create this pool of information? But at the same time, recognizing it doesn't exist, you also go, oh yeah, but how do I protect their identity from others, yet give administrators in City Hall the information that makes them go, okay, this is real?
There's a lot of complexity.
Yes.
And it started off, well, the first problem was, how do we connect individual identity to place and prove it? So we needed people to sign up, enter their address, and the normal thing for setting up any online account is an email loop. But in the background, we needed to add IP fraud checks and variety of other checks to make sure it was a real address at this parcel identifier, this latitude, longitude. And then we wanted to add additional authentication, like an audio PIN to your or PIN number to your home phone and a SMS PIN to your cell phone. And the idea was to add more and more layers of authentication. So right from the beginning, I was very mindful of what needed to be done to protect individual identity while at the same time generating evidence, that hard, reliable feedback data. So that was one side of the equation. The other side was, well, how do we communicate that feedback to the proponent, whoever's conducting the consultation? So what form does that take? Well, most often it's surveys or polls or discussion forums, or ideation has become quite popular recently, where people put in their ideas and they thumb them up and thumb them down and algorithmically prioritize the ideas. So we started to play with how those different kinds of tools would work. And then, of course, the key thing was to be able to export the data in a form that was, again, reliable and defensible and sufficiently transparent to convince people that it was all above board, because people are cynical and suspicious, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to that online voting, you definitely want people to be informed. You want them to have an intelligent vote.
We want them to be informed, and we want them to be authenticated. So this comes back to the identity authentication piece, which I think has really been the reason that has been used to discourage or prevent online voting here. It's done widely now in Europe, but it's been slow coming to Canada and North America generally. But I think it is inevitable that we will get to that point. But to your point, we don't want to empower a bunch of people to vote if they don't know what they're voting about, or they're easily manipulated by the media, for example. We want people to be able to be, thinking the process through and not just knee-jerking over, a bunch of media manipulation.
We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for watching Conversations That Matter. It is thanks to the support of viewers like you through subscriptions at conversationsthatmatter.tv that this program is made possible. So you're faced with a fairly daunting technological challenge to be able to create all of these firewalls and validate every single element that's in that. And then you have to engage administrators. Where are you at right now?
Well, that's interesting, because what we've seen is that it runs the gambit. There are people that genuinely do want to consult. They genuinely do want to be an open, transparent, and accessible process. But there are those that just, talk the talk without walking the walk, because they know that it's de rigueur. We all want to hear about public or civic engagement. But this is what we're talking about is extremely disruptive to the status quo.
Well, yes. If you're an administrator, you're not looking at this saying, no, I'm kind of happy with the way that it is right now. Please don't do this.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have a problem, and it's a huge problem in our democracy process.
So we're 4 years out from the original engagement that you were in, envisioning process that you went through with regards to the Arbutus corridor. And yet when we take a look at what's happening along the Arbutus corridor right now, clearly this process is not part of that equation right now.
No, sadly not. I would have loved if it had been.
So where are you at with your vision of being able to create a greater level of engagement, transparency, informed consent, the ability to vote and have your vote mean something?
We've seen some examples. New Westminster, I'll use the example of their master transportation plan. They had a public meeting around the Patullo Bridge. As you may know, TransLink had said they were going to tear down the bridge, replace it with a 6-lane bridge, no consultation at the time. So New Westminster said, hello, what about us? They had a public meeting, 300 people showed up. They had over 30 completed paper questionnaires on the spot. Within the same day, we had over 1,000 people come to the Play Speak topic page that we'd created, and over 200 completed surveys. So we knew we'd reach more people, we'd reach different people, and we had a higher response rate. And the data was actually in an Excel spreadsheet, so it was easy for the engineers to use in their reporting. They were then able to go to TransLink and say, here's our evidence. Here we heard from X number of people verified as being within our boundaries. This is what our people had to say, and TransLink, to their credit, said, okay, we hear you. We will enter into a larger consultation involving you, New Westminster, you, Surrey, the region, and that has been underway since. So New West was then able to push out a notification to everybody that participated and say, thank you. You specifically contributed to this. You made a difference.
Just imagine that it plays itself out in communities throughout the province and across the country.
That's the objective.
So, all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
A pleasure.
Yeah. To see the complete interview that you've just watched, please join us at our website.